first time I saw Prabhupada was again on television, believe it or not. It was probably 1966, the summer of 66. And there was a show called Alan Burke. And what it was, he was an interviewer, and he used to interview his subjects. They had different interesting things that they did. He would interview them for about 15 minutes, and then he'd start so that they could lay out their trip, and then he would start insulting them. You're a stupid this and that, you know. And he used to smoke and wear a goatee, and thin guy, seemed like a frustrated old poet or something who never made it. But anyway, that was his regular program. I watched it because it was kind of interesting. This was before so it was first. So one week there was a woman on who was a yogini, and she had actually, and I didn't know it, Prabhupada's disciples were chanting the Maha Mantra, and she was talking about yoga. Then somehow or other he must have found out about Prabhupada. Then the next week Prabhupada was on. He was asking Prabhupada questions, and the same devotees were there again, you see. So Prabhupada's, they talked a lot. Alan Burke was talking about cosmic consciousness, and Prabhupada was talking about yoga. I had no idea this was about God, that this had anything to do with religion or the laws of God or anything like that. Most of what Prabhupada said I could not understand. I was spaced out, hippie, you know, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to go into that. And his accent was even a little thicker then. I think he might have become clearer, or somehow I was able to understand it better later on. But so I could hardly understand anything he said, but there were two things. At one point, like I said, did I say this? Alan Burke, I noticed, the first thing I noticed was that Alan Burke did not light into Prabhupada and started insulting him like the usual guests. That was one thing I noted. But he did have this criticism. He said, well, if this movement is spiritual, but I see that you came here in a car, so how is that spiritual, right? So Prabhupada says, if a car is used in Krishna consciousness, then it is a spiritual car. I said, wow, a spiritual car. Wow, that's incredible. And me and my mother are sitting there watching. We have no idea what's going on. We have no idea, you know. And actually, I didn't come to the movement until more than a year late after this. Then the other thing that he said that struck me, everything else I did not understand. At one point, he said the mantra. He said, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I said, wow, that's far out. Yeah, that's, you know, hippies at the time. This is 1966, the summer of 66. This one lady says, if there's a God, why are people starving? Sometimes if the patient is sick, the doctor will prescribe that he does not eat. Finished. That was the answer. That was it, you see. That's called eloquence. That he laid it out and just... Now here's another one that's very, very interesting. This boy in the back at 26 2nd Avenue says to Prabhupada in the question and answer period, he says, somebody told me that people who chant Hare Krishna are crazy. Prabhupada says, not somebody, who somebody? And the boy says, my doctor. And Prabhupada says, oh, a medical man? As if to say garbage man, like with that tone. What does a medical man know about spiritual science? But if he wants to understand, let him read our essay, Who is Crazy? You see? And then he ended that class with, and now distribute prasadam. There were gulab jamuns there. He said, we are not dry philosophers. See, so perfect. I mean, that's perfect drama. Prabhupada always dealt with everyone according to Deshapartakala. He always dealt, he was a perfect artist in preaching. He always dealt with each one individually. Different people might ask the same question, and he answered it in a completely different way. So now I didn't hear this man ask the question. This was at Harvard, May 6th, 69, the night before he married me in Janava and Bardraj and so on and so on. The man asked, "What does Krishna mean?" Now, I didn't hear it, but here's how Prabhupada responded. This is a Harvard scholar. Prabhupada says, "Krishna is a proper noun. You do not know that a proper noun cannot be translated? My name is Bhaktivedanta Swami. Can you give a translation for that?" Now, he answered his questions in waves, I call it. And here's the third wave. But if you want to understand, we have so many books, you can read them. There was kind of a stupid newsman at the airport who interviewed Prabhupada. And he wore glasses, kind of skinny, and was definitely a certain character type. And he said, "Swamiji, in your travels from one place to another..." Whoops. Can I just hold it like this? "In your travels from one place to another, what difficulties do you encounter?" Prabhupada looks up at him and says, "I have no difficulties. You have difficulties." The guy goes, "Oh, yeah, you're right." So they're walking. Prabhupada's walking through the airport. I remember, I was looking down on this scene. They're moving, Prabhupada's moving out of the airport, and they're on the escalator. And I'm looking down on the scene. So the newsman's now asking Prabhupada, "Well, if your movement is so important, how come you have so few followers?" Prabhupada says, "We have 4 rules. No illicit sex, no intoxication, no meat eating, no gambling." The man says, "Oh." I see. So, Jonas Dombergs, he was very intellectual. He's going for his PhD at McGill University. But he told me, from the time that he was 13, he was looking for a man who could tell him about God. So one time, he was up in Dr. Mishra's ashram, upstate New York. And he was asking Dr. Mishra so many questions about God. And Dr. Mishra said, "Don't worry, just meditate." Now, I don't know if Prabhupada was there then at that particular meeting, but he was there on the grounds. I don't know if he was at that meeting. Very likely that he was, and that he heard Janardhan, although I can't say for sure, asking Dr. Mishra, "What about this about God? What about that about..." Okay, so then the next day at breakfast, there's a big breakfast hall, and they're all sitting there, all these uptown yoga ashram visitors and so on. And they're sitting there eating. So Jonas Dombergs, he's sitting at one of the tables, and Prabhupada, out of the clear blue sky, Prabhupada walks up to him and says, "Would you like to go for a walk?" And Janardhan said as he was taken aback, but he said, "Yes." And remember, this is the man who was looking for somebody from the age of 13 to tell him about God, okay? Now, they're walking out on this big, upstate New York ashram, big campus. And Prabhupada said, "This grass is so nice. Only Krishna could make a carpet like this." So then they're going on further. And Prabhupada said, there's a pond, and Prabhupada says, "You see that pond over there?" Janardhan says, "Yes." And he says, "There are millions and millions of living entities in that pond that we cannot perceive, but Krishna knows every one of them." So now this is the third thing that I remember from this little beginning. You see, this is their first meeting. Janardhan looks at the tilak on Prabhupada's forehead, and he says, "That mark on your forehead, what does it stand for?" And Prabhupada says, "It stands for victory." you know. And that's the beginning of Janardhan's relationship with Prabhupada. One time, the first time I was coming before Prabhupada, I was thinking, because Brahmananda built me up, you know, he was the temple president, 26. So I was thinking, wow, I'm a great devotee, you know. So here I am bringing prasadam to Prabhupada, and and I was thinking, he's going to say something to me, like what Bhaktisiddhanta said to Prabhupada, that you should preach you know what I mean? So I thought he was going to say something like that to me, so here I am bringing prasadam. It's the first time. And Prabhupada took the prasadam, but he did not even recognize my existence. He could do that. You know, he could, again, he withdrew his, you're thinking that you're a big devotee or something? this is, this is how I deal with you. You know, and if you were actually humble, he would, you know, he might pat you on the head. He was very pleased. And always reciprocated. Prabhupada's walking through Central Park, morning walk, and he walks past this statue, a sculpture from here up, you know, the sculpture. You see them in Central Park. And in the promenades, whatever. And underneath the sculpture it says Webster. So Prabhupada looks at it as they're going by and says, oh, the dictionary man? And they say, no, Prabhupada, Daniel Webster. And Prabhupada says, ah, Daniel has come. And Daniel has come, basically, is a line from a play by Shakespeare called The Merchant of Venice. So he begins to tell the whole story of The Merchant of Venice because he studied it in college. And, you know, of course, I don't have to go through all that. But anyway, he told the whole story. And then he said, and the purport of this story is, because the merchant wanted the pound of flesh, etc., and he couldn't get it, he was frustrated. And the purport of this story is that in this material world, you can never get what you want. He gave that purport. See, no materialist person can ever get what they want in this material world, no matter what, you know. You acquire so many things, but you can never get, why? Because it's only in spiritual life can you get what you want. Oh, another time at an airport, one time Prabhupada said, he was sitting around, all the devotees are watching him, he's sitting waiting to take a plane somewhere. So he says, can you get my arm in this? You got my arm in this shot? Okay, so he says, the scientists, they are very proud. He went like that with his arm, yeah. And all the devotees, we kind of laughed at it. It was not laughed at him, but we were entertained by it immediately. And I've seen this several times, he withdrew his senses like the tortoise within the shell, you see. He immediately, because I am your spiritual master, I'm not here to entertain you. But you see, because we took it the wrong way, so not blatantly, but just subtly, almost unconsciously. It's an amazing thing. Another very good question and answer. Harvard also, but this is a different group. The International Students Association on Harvard campus, same time, 69, May 69. An Indian man says, in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says that all paths lead to me. So won't we naturally come to Krishna? No matter what we do, right? All paths lead to me. So Prabhupada said, all paths lead to me. He quoted the Sanskrit, and then he said, that is very good. But why, if we will come to Krishna naturally, why is Krishna instructing Arjuna? Not that we will necessarily come to Krishna naturally. Therefore, Krishna is instructing. This is how to come to me. Of course, this is the quickest way. But then he said, actually, so that was the first wave. This is the second. Actually, if we did act naturally, we would come to Krishna. But when we come to this human form of life, we begin to take so many unnatural things. If we did act naturally, we would come to Krishna, but we begin to act unnaturally, the human intelligence, in the human form of life. And so many people go, that doesn't have to be explained. LSD, alcohol, this, that. There are so many ways to fall back down into the lower species. Prabhupada's lecturing in Montreal, a big place, an 8-lane bowling alley. And he was going on very calmly for about, 20 minutes, maybe even a half an hour. And at the time, this is 1968 again, this is the summer of 68. So at the time, there were a lot of new yogis coming into America and giving different teachings. So there was one that was teaching, and Prabhupada was talking about it, but very calmly. And there was one who was teaching that you can meditate, and by meditating after 6 months you will become God. So when he started roaring this time, I was looking around like I was on the defensive, like, who's he yelling at? I started looking around, that he's actually spiritual master of the universe, so he's roaring at the universe. Anyway, at a certain point he says, what is this nonsense that you can meditate and become God? God is God! He is God when he is sitting in the lap of his mother. He is God when he is speaking on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He is God when he is playing with the cowherd boys in Vrindavan. He is God. He is substantially God. This is another thing, that basic thing that an actor has to do that's consistent with not pretending, but with playing the part, is that he's got to make the point. And there Prabhupada made his point most absolutely. He absolutely made every point. So at this time, the temple needed some money, so the brahmacharis were sent out to do work at jobs, and so I was working actually at the McGill Library. That's where Bhaktivinoda sent. So I was working, getting pay, and helping to support the temple. So one day I was coming back from work. I had no idea what was going on. These devotees had just arrived. I didn't know who they were. Of course, a lot of times, all during that summer of 68, there were people coming in, so it was no surprise. And there were 2 or 3 initiation ceremonies during the week, fire sacrifices during the week, as well as Monday, Wednesday, and Friday classes by Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was there for all of them, plus the Sunday program. He's practically there 7 days a week. So I remember I'm walking up the stairs to the Montreal temple, which is on the 3rd floor of this building, and I heard, all glories to Swamiji, a woman's voice, all glories to... And it struck me, I thought, boy, Jadharani's got a stronger voice. Because I had no idea. It wasn't Jadharani, it was Janaki. And I walk in, I see these 7 new devotees, just looking really like halfway between hippies and devotees, and they were really far out in their own way. Sham Sundar, Malati, Mukunda, Janaki, Gurudas, and Jamuna, and Saradia was the 7th. She didn't go with them, but she came with them. So there was a kirtan going on, and I was just coming back from work, so I'm coming into this ecstatic kirtan with Prabhupada and all these devotees who had just arrived, and nobody even told me anything that they were coming or who they were or what they were going to do. So the kirtan ended, ecstatic kirtan, and then Prabhupada said, all the devotees were sitting around in a circle, and Prabhupada wasn't on the Vyasasana, he was sitting where he sits for performing sacrifices, on the floor actually. And so he said, He said, "This is all by the grace of my beloved spiritual master." And then a big tear came out of his eyes, and the whole room just became swelled with, we were like one in this mood, in absolutely caught up in his mood, And he said, in 1959, when I was a householder, my spiritual master came to me in a dream, and he said, "Now you take sannyas, now you go and preach." And so but I was thinking that I am a householder, how can I give up my family? And then he says to us, "So this was Maya." Here he is criticizing him, and we're saying, "Oh no, bro." And then he gets very specifically, he says, of course Prabhupada was always, like what my acting teacher even calls, super specific, always. He says, "So I am very pleased to see these devotees coming, who have come here," and it's on there's a tape of this, "who have come here from San Francisco, and they have stopped here, and they are going to open a center in London." And it was practically like he knew what was going to happen. It was like he was already celebrating what they were going to do. We had no idea, They were going to go maybe meet the Beatles and something, whatever. They were going to try to preach in different ways. But he saw it all. So he said, "I am very pleased. My Guru Maharaj sent so many sannyasis to London. They could do nothing. Now here I am sending these householders." And it was almost as if he was saying, "And they are going to be a great success." And of course, we accepted it. And that's exactly what did happen. This man says to Prabhupada, he's sitting up front, he said, "I can't understand why all these young people are bowing down to you." Yeah, it's karma is just coming in. So Prabhupada's answer is, just as you are thinking they shouldn't bow down, they are thinking that you should bow down. He said, "This is a democracy, is it not? So the majority is bowing down." See, the majority, Prabhupada was always perfect like that. And Shivananda brings an Indian man who's from the West Indies, but he's Indian because the British brought Indians to the West Indies. And he's a Christian. And so, Shivananda brings him in. The man says, Prabhupada's very polite to him, always supremely polite. Perfect gentleman, Prabhupada always was. And the man says, "I'm a Christian." Now I expected, you're an Vedic, you were born for, and you're doing this religion, and they're all meteors and this and that. But no, Prabhupada said, that is all right. We don't say you change your religion. We say that whatever religion helps to awaken your dormant love of God, that is. Say so. Here, always, again, Desha Partakala, and he was always a perfect gentleman. Of course, sometimes he did rip the ether with his voice, like a lion, the lion and the rose. Sometimes like a lion, sometimes soft as a rose. Definitely, he had everything. He was actually, in another sense, I've thought this, that he's the greatest person who has ever set foot on this incontinent continent of North America, South America, the greatest person ever to set foot here. So, that's something to come. Je anilo premadana koruna prachu